Welcome to those who have just joined, everyone, to PREP4BLUE's summer webinar series. It's called Planning for Citizen Participation in Mission Ocean and Waters. And this is our first webinar of a series of 5 that's going to happen over the next 2 weeks. So I'll introduce this specific webinar in a minute and our esteemed facilitator. But I'll just give you some background first to who we are and I suppose the context for the webinar series itself. And we can talk about what we're kind of aiming to achieve over the next couple of weeks. So my name is David White. I work for the MARI Centre in University College Cork, Ireland. And we're working on a project called PREP4BLUE, which is a Horizon Europe funded project that's delivering methods and tools for Mission Ocean and Waters. So, sorry, I'm just trying to change my slides. There we go. And in terms of the mission, so like I suppose I'm aware that the group here today might be quite diverse. So just very briefly to tell you what the EU missions are in general. In 2022, the European Commission formally launched the 5 EU missions, which are Mission Climate, Mission Cancer, Mission Smart Cities, Mission Soil, and Mission Ocean and Waters. And the idea of these 5 missions is that they'll provide concrete solutions to some of the greatest challenges that European and global societies face at the moment. And they all have set specific, particularly ambitious targets that the aim is to achieve them by 2030. So it's quite a tight timescale, and it will require kind of a whole of society approach to achieving them. And our own specific mission that we're working on is Mission Ocean and Waters. So following this webinar, we'll put into the chat, we'll put some links to the missions themselves and, you know, the implementation plan for Mission Ocean and Waters. And I'll email them out as well to attendees afterwards. So you don't have to worry too much about trying to follow or take all this information in right now. Just to give you a bit more specifics. So this Mission Ocean and Waters specifically, it's based around 3 overarching objectives. One on protecting and restoring ocean and freshwater ecosystems, preventing and eliminating pollution, and making the blue economy carbon neutral and circular. And so, again, don't worry about trying to read all this now, but just to give you an example of some of the specific targets, again, that are quite ambitious. So, for instance, protecting 30% of the EU sea area by 2030 and reducing 50% of plastic litter in European seas. Again by 2030. So, you know, these aren't going to be easy, and they will require a lot of work and kind of a whole of society buy-in. So in the blue boxes along the bottom, and I think this is really the context of the webinar series that we've designed, these are 10 of the target objectives that the mission wants to achieve in terms of citizen engagement with the mission. So while it's you know, attempting to achieve its overall targets up here, or its overall objectives, it's going to work with citizens in this way to get to here. So like through these to get to here. And this webinar series is each webinar is themed around one of some of these, and we'll run future webinar series to target them all eventually over the lifetime of the project. PREP4BLUE itself runs until 2025. So look, I think that's enough kind of background information for now. And it would be nice, like I was saying, just to get a bit of a sense of who's in the room today, before, like, who you guys are, before we get on with the webinar in general. So sorry. Oh yeah, I might just go back here for a second. We have a Slido. This is the first slide, which you can join here at slido.com. For those of you with a mobile phone, you can take a screenshot or a shot of this QR code. Or others of you can join at slido.com with the hashtag MOCitizens. So if you could do that quickly, we just have 2 quick questions to gauge the room, and it'll be interesting to see the results. So I'll just leave that up for 1 more second there. Hashtag MOCitizens is what you type in, capital M, capital O, capital C. And the first question is, which country or region are you joining from today? Wow, so immediately we can see quite a diversity of groups. Ireland, Germany. Great. That's fantastic. Portugal, Madeira, and Azores seem to be well represented there. Excellent. Romania, great to see, yeah, some of the Danube and Black Sea region here as well. Brilliant. Great, some Mediterranean, some Black Sea and North Sea. So it seems like we have the 4 basins covered, which is fantastic to see. So yeah, you're all very welcome, and it's just great to see the interest in working on Mission Ocean projects and on Mission Ocean waters across the continent. So that's fantastic. Oh, by the way, sorry, I can see there's chats and things coming into the chat and the Q&A. We will come to them maybe halfway through the webinar, and at the very end, I'll have a quick look once I'm finished with the Slidos here as well. But we will address the questions as the webinar goes on. We might just go to the next one quickly, and then we can get started properly. So what sectors do you represent? Again, just to see where people are coming from. Well, very strong research community here today. Citizen science and advocacy. Again, yeah, so the mix of stakeholders is very interesting, and I think that's fantastic because, again, Mission Ocean projects and Mission Ocean specific funding is very clear on this kind of mixed approach to project teams, and the fact that even, you know, achieving these goals in general can't be done by researchers alone, or certainly can't be done by government in isolation with input from society. So it's great to see that mix there. In terms of the kind of strong research participation today, that's good to see. Look, as I said, there's one of the main things we're aiming these webinars at is for people who will be writing proposals for Mission Ocean funding. So we have that in mind, and we'll kind of come back to that and make sure that the webinars are oriented in that way. So I think look, thanks very much for that. It's great to see the diversity in the room, as I was saying. I think that's enough from me for now. So I'll just introduce our facilitator for today. It's Dr. Maiken Bjørkan from Nordland Research Institute, who we're very lucky to have. Maiken has a background in social anthropology of fishing communities, and specifically on issues where there's uncertainty, or maybe the risk of dispute around things like fishing quotas or land use. And she's also a coordinator of a new EU project called EmpowerUs, which we put a link to in the description. So Maiken, it's great to have you. They are great to have you here today. We do have your presentation ready for us. You do?
Thank you, David, for that nice introduction. I'll try to do the magic with the Zoom tools here. Can you see that?
Yeah, you just have to start your presentation. There's probably a slight delay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got you now.
Great. Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you everyone for coming to this presentation. And before I start, I would really like to underline that what we're presenting here today is based on the work of a lot of people. So it's not just me that has done the thinking for this. And the names are listed on the final slides. And also David is going to post the link to the report that is a result as well of the work that we have done, and which I'm basing this presentation on. Okay. Like David has nicely presented, the Mission Ocean aims to involve regular people in solving problems like climate change and pollution. And there are several reasons why citizen participation is important to achieve Mission Ocean, but to actually do citizen engagement can be difficult. I'm sure you all have that experience. So this presentation is based on a report I already mentioned, which is a deliverable in the EU project PREP4BLUE, and it's available for all of you. In this presentation, we will also outline a step-by-step process for engaging citizens, including preparation, implementation, and monitoring. By following these steps, citizen engagement can be well prepared, it can be effectively implemented, and continuously monitored and evaluated for improvement. I will focus on step 1, preparation, and present a diagnostic tool which we have developed for who and when to include citizens. The second step, implementation, is presented in the report, and I will not go into details here, but rather focus on how to monitor participatory processes. We will get into the details of the diagnostic tools, but first I will present the Postnormal Science approach that the tool is built on. So just hang on, it's a little bit like heavy on the theoretical part, but I would argue that you need to understand this in order to really understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So Postnormal Science acknowledges the uncertainties and complexities of societal challenges. Overall, the postnormal approach emphasizes the importance of including diverse perspectives, understanding different types of uncertainties and risks, and involving regular people, civil society, in decision-making processes to address complex challenges effectively. Postnormal Science says that there is a lot of uncertainty and when there is a lot of uncertainty and disagreement about a problem or a challenge, we need to include different perspectives and use a democratic method to figure out what knowledge is important and who should decide what's true. An uncertainty is a big part of missions' challenges. Some of these uncertainties can be measured and controlled, and others can't. The ones we can control are called controllable problems in the postnormal approach, and we can use scientific methods to manage them. Controllable problems have little conflict, and the risks involved are straightforward. In these cases, informing citizens about the issue is often sufficient. But there are also uncontrollable problems where we don't have all the answers and different people have different opinions. And you can read the definition of uncontrollable problems on the slide. Uncontrollable problems are more complex and uncertain, and they require input from various stakeholders, including citizens. But as you will see in the diagnostic tool, this depends a bit. We are also concerned about different types of risks, like risks we understand well and manage, and can manage, and risks that are more uncertain or have multiple interpretations. The different type of risks are linear risks, and these risks are better understood and manageable. Linear risks are related to controllable problems and can be solved without participation. This is done all the time. Complex risks, and these are risks, for instance, arising from new technologies or complex systems. Uncertain risks, these are risks where we lack knowledge about what is not known. Ambiguous risks are risks that involve multiple interpretations. In these situations, the judgments about risks are subjective and culturally contingent. And I cannot think of a better example of this than the COVID-19 pandemic. You remember how this was when it started. We were all in the blind and we had different interpretations of the risks and how we should behave and what the solution would be. Everybody in the society, it was expert, medical, crew, politicians, authority, and civil society. For instance, one of the questions that we were facing was, when we developed a vaccine, should we force it on the population or should it be volunteer? And the different countries went for different solutions. So that's one example of an uncontrollable problem where the risk is ambiguous. All three risks, complex, uncertain, and ambiguous, are related to uncontrollable problems. So simply put, when we're facing uncontrollable problems, we need to use a different approach that includes different perspectives, knowledges, and considers different types of uncertainties and risks. This way, we can make better decisions and find solutions together. what the best solution is context dependent, and participation can always be an option. Also, the problems can range over time from uncontrollable to controllable and vice versa. So the problem will have like a life cycle, right? And what the right way of using this in your mission or initiative, it's difficult to pre-decide, but we will try to help you with a tool to define this. But first, so this slide shows the different type of level of participation. It is often called the ladder participation. So citizen participation means that individuals from different backgrounds get involved in activities like decision-making or generating knowledge together. It can take various forms, from decision-making or from providing opinions to directly influencing research processes or outcomes. The level of participation can vary, and this ladder model, as I mentioned, is often used to illustrate different levels of engagement and citizen power. The matrix that you see here on this slide is based on different forms of citizen participation on the top line. The top line is different forms of citizen participation, and moving to the right, the 5 different options: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower have different degrees of decision-making powers related to them. You can read the content yourselves. At the bottom line, where the different what the different options should give back, or what the promise to the public is described. And I think it's safe to say that these categories may overlap in real life. I also want to underline that it is important to have an idea of what a given mission initiative is aiming for. And I will come back to this when I talk about monitoring citizen engagement. So in summary, the matrix illustrates different levels of engagement, granting increasing level of citizen power and influence over defining problems and developing solutions. And you will recognize the categories here in the diagnostic tool that we have developed. So EU missions require the involvement of various societal actors to tackle societal challenges effectively. Active citizen engagement, credible processes, and a focus on relevant and actionable objectives are crucial for the success of these initiatives. While citizen participation has benefits, it also has challenges. Deciding who should participate and how to include them can be difficult, and some people may feel fatigued or uninterested in participating. There are practical and analytical limitations to citizen participation. For instance, not all citizens can actively participate in workshops or meetings due to time constraints and lack of interest in technical matters. So it's important to address these challenges and ensure that participation is more than a token gesture. And while the idea of deliberative democracy, engaging citizens, is noble, achieving consensus may not always be feasible. If you focus too much on a consensus, you can mask conflict, and some will avoid coming at all. I'm sure if you've done any type of workshops or seminars, I'm sure that you have experienced this, that if the aim is to have consensus, you may be disappointed. So instead of focusing on consensus, we suggest fostering respectful conflict and acknowledging diverse values as the best way to contribute to meaningful participation and decision-making processes. If I'm going to say anything as a social scientist, I think that might be my best go-to advice. The focus on consensus is problematic. Okay, the diagnostic tool. So this may look a lot, but I will talk you through it. So far, we have talked about why to involve citizens in a mission and the different levels of participation to consider in an ocean initiative or decision-making process. To help determine the appropriate level of citizen involvement for different types of mission-related problems, we suggest this diagnostic tool based on controllable and uncontrollable problems that you can see on the slide here. I will now go through each of the dimensions that you see on the figure, and they have all actually been mentioned already. So if you, I don't know if I can use the, yeah, so if you can see my pointer thingy?
Yeah, we can see your mouse.
Yeah. So, so if you start here on the bottom right, where it says controllable problems toward more uncontrollable problems. So recall that controllable problems have little conflicts and a simple scope of risk, while uncontrollable problems are complex, uncertain, and ambiguous. So if you're moving down the arrow here. For controllable problems, informing citizens about the issue may be sufficient. However, for uncontrollable problems, a broader range of stakeholders, including citizens, need to be involved. So at the bottom left, you see 4 categories that should help you reflect on key issues. What is the scope of risk? What type of input is necessary? Who are the relevant actors? And what is the level of participation? Let's jump down to the first orange box. What is the scope of risk? In the orange arrow, you recognize the simple risk starting at the far right, just above controllable problems. And moving down the lines as complex risk, uncertain risk, or ambiguous risk. The next category is type of input. So given the problem at hand, what type of input or knowledge should you aim to include? So if you're here, should you include science from scientists, experience-based knowledge from practice experts, or knowledge from stakeholders or civil society? Just above the orange line in the figure, you see the blue box, which next is suggesting experience and reflection, which indicates that the problem becomes more complex. You may consider including the experiences and reflection of actors such as scientists, practice experts, stakeholders, or civil society. So this depends on your mission initiative. The relevant actors can be scientists, can be practice experts like engineers or fishers, or they can be stakeholders. Often fishers are also counted as stakeholders, or civil society. And they may change hats or have several hats. And you can see that civil society encompasses all of these categories because obviously scientists is also part of civil society and so on. At the top of the figure here, you see the level of participation. If you follow the arrow down, you can see it moves down from empowerment to involve and collaborate, consult and decide, through consult, and then inform at the bottom. So you will recognize these terms from the matrix presented a couple of slides ago. And note that the levels of participation, this ladder, is not directly linked to the actors, but to the type of input and how you involve people. This really needs thorough reflection. We have a table at the end of this presentation that suggest a way to help you monitor exactly what you're doing. So now I will use some examples to illustrate how you can actually use this tool. So please make a note that you actually have to make some assumptions, right, for each of the initiatives that you would like to use this model or a diagnostic tool for. So if you first take the case of blue mussel toxins, for instance, if you like seafood and a nice fish soup, and make it yourself, this may be a question that that's important to you. You would like to know where you can pick your blue mussels yourself and be safe. And I think this can be understood as a controllable problem with little conflict. It is a simple risk in the sense that we understand what the problem is and we know how to prevent it. Scientists then, so we're here, simple risk, we just need knowledge input from scientists. So they can provide knowledge on the toxin levels and inform citizens about where you can pick the safe mussels and where the unsafe mussels are. You don't need to involve citizens and so on. They don't disagree about the issue at hand. So now we can use that's just an example of a simple or a controllable problem. And there are so many in society that we do this way every day. So now we can use the figure to diagnose an uncontrollable problem. Take coastal erosion due to sea level rise as an example. And imagine that a coastal community has houses that are in danger of falling into the sea. The coastal erosion is causing the houses to fall into the sea, or they are in danger of this. So I argue that this is an uncontrollable problem, and it is reasonable to say that the scope of risk is somewhere between uncertainty and ambiguous, being uncertain and ambiguous. There are lots of unknown unknowns about sea level rise and coastal erosion, like how it affects the ecosystem and coastal settlements. The situation also involves multiple interpretations about the risk. The people that owns the houses at risk will probably feel different about what a good solution is to the problem than people living in the community, but not close to the shore. And the coastal community may feel differently about what the solution is compared to the regional and national government. For instance, the people living in the houses may think that a large wall, like a dike, is a good solution, while the other residents think that this will hamper their access to the sea line. And the government may think it is too expensive. So in this case, with ambiguous risk, the type of input, so if you think it's ambiguous risk, so there's my arrow, so it's ambiguous risk, the type of input necessary is co-production and responsibility, but also experience and reflections and scientific knowledge. So if you use the figure and then you move up from this risk, so you just move up here, we see that the relevant actors include scientists, practice experts like engineers, stakeholders like house owners, and arguably the coastal community can be considered stakeholders. And finally, the civil society at large will be paying for this and should be listened to. So finally then, at the top of this figure, what level of participation should you reach for? So there is no one solution to this, but when the problem is so difficult, it is probably a good idea to at least aim for the involve and collaborate in order to ensure the legitimacy of the solution. Still, there may be no consensus on the issue, but if the process is good, it is probable that it will be less confrontational and have more legitimacy. So in summary, we suggest involving citizens depend on the nature of the problem. For simple issues. Informing citizens may be enough, while complex problems require collaboration and input from a wider range of actors, including citizens. So we will soon have a little break here, so you can think about this. But the aim of the typology is to help you decide when and why to involve citizen in a Mission Ocean initiative. And I hope that this is something that will provide helpful. And you might have noticed that I've underlined the issue of consensus several times to avoid thinking too much about consensus, but also I would like to underline that there's something called engagement fatigue. So you should really be respectful towards people's time and consider when participation is necessary and how to do it. So after this, we still have a couple of slides to go, but now I think we'll give you a short break, David.
Great, thanks very much, Maiken. We can just have a quick look there through the Q&A. I can see Tiago, hi Tiago, put in a comment saying his use of world cafes and SDGs, so structured democratic dialogue processes. He has managed to find something like consensus in his use of them. So he recommends those methods in particular. So thanks very much, Tiago. Did you say, Sarah, do we have hands up outside of the Q&A?
We do. I think, Christian, do you have your hand up? You should be able to unmute there and ask your question if you'd still like to.
If not, we can keep moving. I mean, I can ask. So, Mike, just a quick question. So, I suppose for people maybe who are putting together funding proposals for any project, marine or freshwater related, be it Horizon or be it whatever else, and they're thinking about their problems and they're thinking about their who their target communities are or who they'd like to engage or setting up any activities. Is this something that they should be looking at the project proposal level before they get funding, or is this something that you can kind of do at the beginning of your project as you decide kind of the level of engagement that you need to do, or is it both?
Yes, so I think, well, like I said, there's not like one solution, it's hard to find one answer to this. But I would suggest considering when you're writing the proposal to have a good think about who you're actually going to include and how you're going to do it. For instance, in the EmpowerUs project that I coordinate, well, if you say that it's going to be true co-creation, for instance, then if you're really going to achieve that, it's difficult because it's like the head and the tail kind of a problem, because you want to get funding to do in order to have your project, and then you have to say what you're going to do. But then the next step, then you're starting to interact with the coastal communities, for instance, and then you have already defined what you're going to spend the money on. But then that's not co-creation. That's not really co-creation, right? So it can be difficult. In the EmpowerUs project, we actually have a fund where of 50,000 euros for each of the living labs. That is not predefined what we're going to spend the money on, but that wasn't easy to achieve, but it's definitely possible. So that's one way of doing it. If you want the co-production and co-responsibility, I suppose that's what you really should be doing, and not just having them entering afterwards. So I don't know, I just babbled away there. Was that
no, I think that's a really good example. That kind of I suppose practical solution at a writing a funding application level is to get something like that. That funding for communities to do something, or for you to do something with communities that's not predefined, which means that you can get to this level of empowerment and of real co-production. We've got just two more in the chat here. I've got one. Hi, Maiken, to put you on the spot. Are you aware of any literature regarding engagement fatigue? if specifically related to marine social science. I mean, if you're not, we can think about this and link it afterwards. But do you have anything in mind?
Yes. I have a couple of articles, but I can't remember them, but I can definitely send them afterwards. But also I can just, like, I think any social scientist that you have met in the world, if you know, every time you've written an application and then you're going to go ahead and do the workshops that you've written into the application, and then it's actually really hard because there is a lot of engagement fatigue. People are busy, you know. I think it's wonderful that you have this idea that you should include everybody in initiatives like Mission Ocean and so on. But at the same time, people are, I mean, I'm sure you all encountered this, that people are busy and not necessarily interested in spending their afternoons with scientists.
Yeah. And then we have one more here. Seems related. What about the challenges to deliberative democracy of too many entry points by multiple stakeholders and citizens? I'm not quite sure if I understand the question. Is it that of it being an issue where, if Marta, if you want to elaborate maybe, of
yeah, I don't understand the entry point. What does that mean in this context?
Or of certain stakeholders having more access through different means than others maybe. But if you want to elaborate, Marta, please do. And let me just see, is there a few more coming in here? Maiken, how easy was it to get the EC to allow 50,000 living labs as funds for them to use as communities decide best? Maybe do you want to just, and we might move on after that then, but just because we have to watch the time, just that maybe a bit more specific information on working that into a grant proposal, or as much as you're able to give anyway.
Yeah, so that was interesting, and it still is interesting. So it was. So we wanted to have this fund or this pool of money so we could actually ensure the co-creation part of it. And what we have done is that we have in each, so we simply have, it's not simple, but we have this, each of the living labs has a money for a pilot. And that money is, it's one of the partners has the responsibility for this money. And it's not as if you can just spend it on anything. This money has to be used in line with the project proposal, and it's and also we can't use it for subcontracting. So so writing it into the proposal wasn't actually the most difficult part. It's now, I think, when we're going to actually come up with a pilot that we're going to use the money for. We have to check this, you know, you have to constantly keep checking that if it's going to be refundable by the EU and the rules and the financial officer. So so it's not like a freebie money and you can do whatever you like. But so when we have more experience with this, we can come back and see how it actually went.
So there's potential to be really impactful. We'll just go to Marta's question because I can see we have her up here in the panel, and then we'll move on.
Okay, thank you, David. I will try to make it short. It was just the idea that in most projects and programs right now, it's kind of mandatory to engage with citizens or stakeholders, and at the end we end with many participatory processes happening at the same time. And then you may have an issue of those stakeholders or citizens that were able to participate more, to having greater voice, to have more power than others. And this is the kind of question that may be tricky in terms of representativeness and democracy. So I know it's a hard one, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. I think it's a good one to reflect on, right? So it's I think it's very, I think it has to, maybe one answer you can find, or I find that one thing that I've learned a lot during the last year from is using the principle of leaving no one behind. So I think it's a UN principle, and it's been important also in the EU and the green change and all that. You should leave no one behind. So that having that principle like as a build or like what you say, like the foundation for everything we do, it has forced us to think a bit differently on all these participatory events that we do. For instance, in a Norwegian coastal community, we have a lot of Polish people that lives there, but we've always overlooked them earlier. But now with that principle at the back of our head, we are really trying to involve them. Or you have, for instance, women with kids, often they are the ones taking care of them, and maybe they don't have time in the evening. So maybe you can have the seminar at a different time or some, but I think there will always be power issues. And you can never, like in the deliberative democracy theory, it's this like you want to create a space that is free of power issues and so on, and an arena where you can speak freely and there is no difference in power. But I think that all of us know that this is, it's hard to actually create. And also when you go outside of that arena that you have created, the power relations will be the same as before we came. So I think it's just important to take those things into consideration. And in the manual that we have written, we have provided a template for mapping stakeholders, so you can have a look at that, and maybe that's helpful.
It's great. Thanks very much for that, Maiken. I suppose for now, maybe if you can move on and finish the presentation, and we might take a few more questions then at the end. Thanks, everyone.
So now you're shaking off just now you know the diagnostic tool and how more or less how it can be used. So I hope that this can be useful for all of you somehow. And so this slide, just recall that we have a process that consists of 3 steps: the preparation, implementation, and monitoring. What we have done so far is to talk about how you prepare for citizen engagement. And we have introduced the rough diagnostic tool, which is a part of this step. So the complexity of challenges that we face today often requires citizens to participate in decision-making, policy production, governance, and research, but not always. To avoid overwhelming citizens and ensure a productive process, it's important to carefully consider why citizens are being called to participate and how their engagement will unfold. And building relationships and communicating with the target community or stakeholders or civil society is essential. This involves engaging with community leaders and key stakeholders, identifying their needs and involving them in preparatory activities. And like I already mentioned, the mapping template, so mapping participants and considering issues that we already talked about, like gender and equality, are important to ensure inclusivity. Yes, so in the report, as mentioned, you will find a template for mapping, and there are so many of them out there. So if anybody wants to share others, I think that's great, because there's many ways of doing this. So the next stage here then, where it says 2, implementing citizen stakeholder. So the next step in a mission initiative would be to actually implement citizen engagement. There are an enormous amount of methods and strategies available to implement citizen engagement already, and there are hundreds of very good manuals and tools on the internet. And engagement can be part of every level of the mission initiative and can be organized in different ways. It can be citizen assemblies, workshop interviews, games, and so on. And what you can see, I hope you can see it in the background of this slide, that's a picture from co-creating coastal maps for coastal zone management. So the toolbox we have made for citizen engagement, it's not exhaustive, so the part 2 in the manual, and there are other resources that you can explore online. And choosing tools and methods depend on the type of the problem that you're facing and the desired level of participation. So we will not go into examples here in this webinar, but just keep in mind that we have some examples in our manual, and there are so many others online. So finally, we have the third step, and this is often forgotten. That's why I would like to focus on it. Monitoring or assessing what we are actually achieving, but also what we actually want to do. We think that this step is important for several reasons. Evaluating the effectiveness and type of engagement is crucial to improve the process. Monitoring and assessment provide important results and evidence of the value of citizen participation. And it's important to be explicit about the aim of participation and avoid tokenism. You should know what you are trying to achieve, communicate this in your project, and monitor if you achieve it. And this type of monitoring and assessment can take different forms, focusing on the outcomes of or the learning process. And there are different stages of evaluation, and it's important to consider participants' perspectives. Now, I have 2 more slides, and I will present one practical example for how to monitor and evaluate a citizen engagement project using a simple table. Simple table, like the table at least. And I don't think it's too hard to understand. So what I will do is to present a practical example from the Norwegian fisheries context, the Norwegian reference fleet. I used this method in my PhD to monitor how and whether fishers are included in stock assessment for Northeast Arctic cod. So fish stock assessment is vital for sustainable fisheries, but we have seen some cases where relying on scientific data alone has had negative consequences, such as the collapse of the Canadian cod fisheries. And for decades now, it has been argued that including fishers in knowledge production is beneficial, since fishers possess valuable, practical knowledge that complements scientific perspectives or knowledge. In line with this idea, the Institute of Marine Research in Norway started a project called the Norwegian Reference Fleet in 2000. So this fleet consists of selected fishing vessels that serve as a benchmark for scientific research and data collection in Norway. It was introduced as a groundbreaking initiative to include fishers' knowledge in fisheries management. But in my PhD, I wanted to find out exactly what changes the reference fleet cost and pinpoint where and how fishers were included and developed in the table that you see on the slide. So I think that following what you're actually doing in any type of mission initiative is important, and this is just one way of doing it. In the manual, we present several tables for different type of issues, so you can have a look at that and see if any of them are useful, or you can just use this as an inspiration to develop your own. So as this table illustrates, fishers can be involved at different levels of participation with varying degree of decision-making power. They can also play a role in various stages of knowledge production, here divided into, you can see it here, into data collection, assessment, and advice. So the vertical axis presents the level of responsibility given to different stakeholders, and the horizontal axis represents the different stages of knowledge production. You can see the terminology here. Working with science is suggested as the easiest and least demanding way to get involved in the table. This involves fishers and scientists working together, which can take different forms of level of cooperation. And another way fishers can be involved is providing knowledge that is independent from scientists. This is called in addition to science. This means that fishers can contribute their own assessment and advice, which differs from scientists' knowledge. This creates a competing source of knowledge and advice. And the third way fishers can be involved is by taking responsibility for knowledge provision in fisheries management. This means that they will be accountable for providing the necessary information instead of relying solely on scientists. So this seems a bit maybe far out, but there are actually examples that exist, like in New Zealand. It doesn't necessarily mean fishers perform all the tasks themselves, but they oversee and are accountable for the knowledge functions in the advisory process. So, using the table, I explored how fishers were included, and what I found was that the establishment of the reference fleets had brought about a significant change by involving fishers in data collection for stock assessment and advice. That's the cross. They collected data, including species, composition, length, and age information, and others, and used the IMR and International Council of the Sea for their assessments. And they were included in these processes. However, it's important to note that the fishers' level of responsibility in data collection is limited. Moving down the table. They follow standardized processes and have little influence over the data collection process. The role is comparable to what a technician or research assistant has, with minimal responsibility in deciding what data to collect and how to interpret it. The transformation of collected samples into age data is also done without the participation. And in summary, while fishers work with science here, decision-making power remains primarily with the scientists. So moving to the assessment stage, it appears that the fishers are not involved at all, only zeros. This highly specialized and traditionally exclusive, an exclusive process where only designated scientists from various national marine laboratories like the Institute of Marine Research in Norway and other countries are allowed to participate. So yes, so going to the final stage, the advice stage, the reference fleet does not provide, as I found it at the time, an opportunity for fishers to participate either. This is because the current management systems reserve the advisory function for the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, and the establishment of the reference fleet does not change that. So this type of table should be used in a constructive way. So it's one way to help you reflect. Is it good enough what we achieved? Was this what we wanted to achieve? Or if the aim is to include fishers or other actors in your initiative at more stages of stock assessment than data collection, or at a deeper level of responsibility, then if that was your aim, then this wasn't a good result. But the point is that a structured approach using a table to track what is done is helpful, because then you can go in and adjust what you're doing, and you can give honest feedback to stakeholders or civil society. Okay, one more slide. So, in summary, citizens can be mobilized to participate in Mission Ocean in 3 steps that can be separated analytically, but not necessarily in practice: preparation, implementation, and the monitoring / assessment. So note that all these steps are interrelated and are likely to take place simultaneously. Who to engage and why will vary depending on the context. There is no single solution, and engagement demands preparation. The implementation of different engagement methods will vary depending on the context, and citizens may be called upon for a variety of reasons, such as their knowledge, for their input on data, the methods and results, or just to check the ID or like superficially. But it is important to monitor how citizens are engaged and the outcomes of the engagements to enable shared learning on the process, to inform the direction of the research or the initiative, to improve accountability, and ultimately to inform policy and practice in the space you're operating in. And importantly, we suggest to use a trained expert like a social scientist who will know the methods and where to find the methods and how to use the methods. They will be aware of the pitfalls of each method, and they are familiar also with ethical issues. Because please remember that there are a lot of ethical issues that you have to take into account when you're doing the citizen engagement. And they are so complex and so many that I won't cut into them here. But I also want to say that it's really nice and fun and inspiring to work with citizen engagement. So I highly recommend it as well. Yeah.
Great.
So that was it. Thank you. But I just want to wish all of you good luck with your applications or your Mission Ocean activities, or whatever you're doing. And please feel free to ask questions or send me an email or remind me if I forget to send you like the articles I said. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maiken. And yeah, so I could just see some comments there coming through. We will send an email with all the links that we put into the chat and all the slides and everything like that following the webinars. And the recordings to all 5 will be made available in a few weeks' time, probably at the end of June. So everything will be available. Maiken, yeah, so just thanks again for that. I think it's just really interesting and really valuable information. And I mean, I think even if you think of all the levels that it's relevant at, one of them is kind of a multi-year project level that engages citizens. But even, if you come down to kind of, specific initiatives, say like by citizen science groups or something, I think the information you gave about, reflecting on who you want to engage with a specific event or initiative and why you want to do it. And then not just kind of doing it and getting it done and moving on, but rather making sure that you've got some kind of system of evaluating how the engagement itself is going and not just the event, I think is really important. I just see one interesting question here from Lucy. The question is, do we have data on the impact on the project calendar, depending on the level of participation that you choose? Maybe you are aware of data, but at least maybe you could talk to your experience of how long or how much you have to build into a project calendar, depending on the level that you're looking for.
I didn't understand the question, actually.
Sorry, so I presume the question means if you're planning a project and you're thinking about allocating your time over the next couple of months or years. And you've obviously got different levels of participation that you want to achieve.
Yeah.
The question, I think, is there data on how much each level takes? But at the very least, I was going to ask you, if you don't know that, just in your experience, how intensive are some of the different levels, or how have you gone about building them into the project timeline?
Yeah. So I think I think the most important part is actually to prepare, right? To make a good preparation and map your stakeholders and have a good idea of who you want to involve and why, and then actually spend, if possible, do like traditional anthropological methods like field work and immerse yourself in the community. But that often we don't have that luxury because we don't have the funding for doing that. So I think if you do a good job at the beginning for preparing, and then choose, I'm sorry, I can't be more concrete, but if you choose the good method, but if you do a good preparation, right, then you have the better chance to choose the right method that will actually make you achieve what you want to achieve. And that all depends on the funding you have available and the time. I mean, there's so many practical issues. Like even if you want to include a lot of stakeholders and you don't have money to invite more than 20 people to dinner at the, all these practical issues, and then follow up afterwards. And I think maybe just be very careful about what you promise as well. Be very truthful and honest about what you want to achieve and how you're doing with that. And that's why I say it's important to monitor what you're actually achieving, because people will get very disillusioned. They understand that you can't, I mean, people understand reality, but you shouldn't say you are doing something that you're not.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. Would you mind just stopping sharing there? I just want to share one more slide to give, give the audience a bit of information on the upcoming webinars. No, so thanks again. That was really, really interesting, Maiken. I'm just going to, just while we finish there, and we will finish up now, everyone, I'm just going to give you some information on the upcoming webinars we have. Sarah, would you mind popping? I've also got a very short 3-question survey that it would be great if you guys could answer about today's webinar, but also on, there's a question, is there any training in terms of citizen engagement with Mission Ocean that we could offer you? So please fill that out. We'll think about how we might be able to integrate that into our project over the next 2 years. Just quickly, tomorrow is our next webinar on increasing social inclusion through Mission Ocean projects. Working with increasing social inclusion with any initiatives that Mission Ocean is working towards. So in terms of gender, in terms of including non-coastal people and inland people or non-river-based people in initiatives and making the mission accessible to them, in terms of class, race, everything like that. So the mission is very strong on that. So that's what tomorrow's webinar is going to be about. Next week, we've got one on citizen science to support Mission Ocean project activities. Again, it's a constant feature of the last 2 Horizon Europe calls for Mission Ocean. And then after that, we've got community-based social marketing, an introduction, all about how to promote better behavior in terms, that work towards mission objectives. And then finally, we've got one on working with the European Solidarity Corps for restoration initiatives. Again, something that's constantly, that we constantly see in Mission Ocean project funding. So we'll have a project participant and someone from the European Solidarity Corps from Ireland with us in that. And that will be interesting. By the way, we did a study earlier this year on barriers to engaging with citizens in the marine and freshwater sector. The 2 that came up, number 1, were time and money, maybe unsurprisingly, but that is exactly what the European Solidarity Corps is designed to provide projects, is a set of volunteers. You get like organizations can apply for funding and then get given volunteers to work on a specific project. So that might be of interest to anybody who finds that time and money are barriers to whatever they're doing. I imagine that might be many of us. So I think we'll leave it there. We'll try and stay as closely to the hour as possible. And I want to thank all of you for coming. It's great to have the participation. We had over 100 at one point today, and the diversity in the audience. And a special thanks again to Maiken, our facilitator, for a really interesting presentation. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll see some of you again throughout the webinar series, and we'll be in touch by email. Thank you, and see you soon.